you can draw this in Procreate. All you have to do is follow my easy video tutorial in which I will guide you through every single step. Watching and following a video tutorial like this one is the perfect way to learn how to use Procreate. Because in this video we will be using lots of tools like layer clipping mask, alpha lock, motion blur, and a lot more. We will only be using the brushes that are already in the app. So you're ready to go. Be sure to watch this video all the way till the end and then of course share your result on Instagram. Tag me in the image so I will be able to find it and perhaps you will see your artwork in the next You Can Draw This video. Let's get started drawing this fun little camping scene. First of all, our canvas is 2500 by 2500 pixels. And the first step we'll take is filling the background. And we'll do that with this dark blue color. Of course, you can download this color palette for free through the link in the description. We'll use this dark blue color and drag the color onto our canvas to fill it. Then we'll make a new layer above this layer that we just filled. And this is a very important step, so be sure to click the plus and make a new layer on which we will draw a circle. And we'll use this blue color for that. And we'll go to the brushes and go to the calligraphy set and use the monoline brush. And we can make the brush a bit bigger, let's say 20%, but it doesn't really matter. And then just loosely draw a circle. If you hold your pen in place, it'll snap to a nice looking shape. And if you hold one finger on your screen, it'll turn into a perfect circle. And you can go to Edit Shape on top and move it around a bit until it's right where you want it to be. And then you can drag in the color to fill this circle. Let me move it just a little bit more to the center. You can do that by going to this arrow and then you can just move it around with your pen or your finger. And we can place it a bit more in the middle. Now it's time to start drawing our scene in this circle. And to make sure that we stay within this shape, within this circle, we will use layer clipping mask. Just click the plus, then click that new layer and select clipping mask. Now this new layer is clipped to the layer below. And whatever we paint on it, it will only show up on that circle shape. Perfect. Now we'll keep using that monoline brush under calligraphy and we'll pick this color right here, the third color in the color palette. First, let's start just about here and make a horizontal line. If you have one finger on your screen, it'll be perfectly horizontal. And then on top, let's make a bit more of a wobbly shape. Just a little bit. Then we have to make sure that we close the shape on both sides. And then you can drag in the color to fill it. Next, we'll make a new layer underneath this one. So we'll go back to that circle layer, layer 2, click the plus, and it'll make a layer between the one we just made and the circle layer. And automatically it is clipped. And I will pick this dark brown color. And let's go to the selection tool, that's that S-shaped ribbon, and go to rectangle. And we'll make a little rectangle that just sticks out on that underside of our dirt layer. And we can drag in the color into that selection to make that shape. And I want to place it a bit higher so we can go to the move tool and drag it up just a little bit. Next, let's add some mountains in our background. And since it's the background, of course, we need to go below this foreground layer. So again, click that circle layer, then click the plus, and we automatically will get a layer that is clipped to that circle. And we'll pick this blue color right here. And now let's start about here and make some wobbly lines for our mountains. We'll go back up again. And of course we do need to close that shape so we can drag the color in and fill it. And now that we have our mountains, let's start adding some trees. And we'll add the trees on a new layer all the way on top, and we won't use clipping mask here. Let's start with some trees in the foreground. We'll use this light green for that. And let's just zoom in a little bit. Let's add a tree here. And these trees, they are pretty abstract. They aren't realistic looking trees. We're making something more stylized. Just place some random trees with these wobbly lines. And on this side as well. And keep some space between these light trees. And one here. And then we'll fill all these trees with our green by just dragging in that circle into those shapes, like that. And now we are going to pick a darker green, the one right next to it, and make a layer below these trees. So we can draw some trees that are behind these light trees. And of course, these trees can overlap each other. So we can draw one that's a bit behind that tree here. And since we are not using clipping mask, some trees can stick out of the circle a little bit. But I like that playful effect. And a little tree here. And let's draw one here as well. But of course you can decide for yourself where you want to place your trees. Now let's fill them all. Drag in the color again. Like that. And then we'll go even darker. Grab this color right here. And again we'll make a layer below these trees so we can draw trees that are even more in the background. And it will be a bit harder to see because, well, they are a bit in shadow. Just make sure that every time you make a tree that you close that shape. Otherwise the color will leak out when you try to fill those shapes. You can also make them a little bit smaller than the other trees that you just made. And let's draw a tree here that's sticking out on the side. And, well, maybe one more here. All right, let's fill these as well. Hoping that all our shapes are closed. Yes. Now finally, we'll add some even darker trees. Those will be pretty hard to spot. Let's again make a new layer under the other trees. And I'll just zoom in a little bit so I can see my trees. Not even sure if they show up on camera. I hope so. Just some darker trees. Perhaps one here. And one there. And we'll fill these with our dark green color. Where's the last one? Oh, there. Now these trees, they can't just float around. Of course, they need some trunks. So we'll go back to the layers. First, we'll go for the light layer, the light trees, and pick this green, this brown. Of course, the tree trunks are brown, and we'll add some simple looking tree trunks. Just to line up, and some branches. Try to vary the shapes a little bit, making some really playful trees. And we'll use the same brown for the trees that are behind these trees. Let's make some more playful trunks. There, now we'll move to those darker trees, and we can use this darker brown for that, because of course these trees are more in the shadow, so those tree trunks will appear to be darker as well. This one right here, and then we'll move to the darkest trees, which I can really barely see in this light. We'll kind of have to guess. Oh yeah, there it is. We have one here, and on this side we have two more trees. Next, let's add a tent. And we'll make a new layer for that, and that should be above our tree layers, because of course it'll be in front of the trees. You know, to make everything a bit more organized, we could just group our tree layers. If you swipe to the right on these layers and select group, and now we have a nice little group for our trees. Let's make a new layer on top of that to start drawing our tent. I'll pick this light color for that, the light brown, and we will still use the monoline brush. I do want to make it a little bit smaller. I'll go for 10%. To draw our tent, we will start with a triangle. Let's draw it just about here near the water's edge, and if you hold your pen in place, it'll snap to a perfect triangle. And you can go to edit shape right here, and you can drag these handles around a bit to adjust your triangle if you like, and drag in the color to fill your shape. To make it look like a tent, we also need a rectangle. So click the plus for a new layer, grab this darker brown, and now we will draw a rectangle right next to that triangle. You can go to edit shape and drag these handles a bit to adjust that shape. What's it doing there? I don't know. A bit like that. And let's drag in the color to fill that shape. And it already looks a bit like a tent, but to make it look even more like a tent, we need some flaps. on the front of our tent. And we'll do that by using clipping mask again. So we'll click the plus. First you need to select that triangle layer, click the plus for a new layer, and then select clipping mask again. And then we'll still use the monoline brush. And let's make a yellow triangle first. We'll make a smaller triangle, and that will be, well, the entry point of the tent, and some light is leaking out of that tent like that. And then you could just drag in the color to fill it. And then for the flaps, we'll create a new layer above. And let's pick this orange. I'll make the brush a little bit smaller, 6%. Let's zoom in a little bit more. And let's draw these flaps. And drag the color in. Now I want to add some shadow behind those flaps, and we'll do that on a layer between that triangle and the brown, well, the yellow triangle and the brown triangle. So click the plus, and we will set this layer to multiply. So click that N and scroll up to multiply. Now whatever we paint on this, it'll appear darker. So if you paint with the base color of that tent on top of it, it'll look darker. Now let's go to airbrushing and use the soft brush. And let's just pick that base color of that tent. And we will set our brush to 2% and the opacity to 50%. And now just add a little shadow to that tent. Because that flap, that will make a little shadow there. Next, our campfire. Let's pick this dark brown color for that. We'll make the wood first. And let's make a new layer for a campfire. So we'll go all the way to the top, click the plus for a new layer. Let's go back to the calligraphy brushes and use the monoline brush. So let's make 2 logs. One like this. And one that's crossing it. Looks a bit like a, well, like an X that marks the spot where the treasure is. Let's fill it with brown. It also looks a bit like a band-aid. All right. We got a base for our campfire. Now let's add the fire. We'll do that on a new layer again. Click the plus and use this orange right here. Let's make the brush a bit smaller again. Let's go to 3% and let's draw a simple looking flame. Just something like that. And then on a new layer, or you could do it on the same layer, but if you use a new layer, you get far more control. We'll pick this yellow color. Here we will make a smaller flame shape. Something like that, and fill it. Well, that doesn't really look like fire yet, right? It looks a bit, well, not like fire. So let's add a layer on top of this, and we'll set this layer to add so that everything will appear brighter. Let's go to airbrushing again and use the soft brush, and we'll keep our brush at this yellow color. And we'll set the size of our brush to about 8%, and we will lower the opacity to about 30%. And now let's add a glow around our fire. Really gently, slowly building that up. Let's also add these little sparks flying in the air. We'll have to make our brush a bit smaller for that. let's just go to 1%. We can make the opacity a bit higher, let's say 60%. And let's add these tiny little dots, like sparks, these little cinders flying in the air. That looks nice. Now I want to add some shadow to the surroundings, like that forest floor, that shore here, that dirt. I want to darken that a little bit. So let's go to this layer right here and let's set it to alpha lock. That way we can only paint on the pixels that are already on that layer. And we'll use the soft brush under airbrushing. Make it a bit bigger. Let's say 10%. And let's pick a darker brown. Pick this one. And let's add some shadow about here and on this side, because that light of the fire, it's not reaching there. And let's darken this layer also. Let's click it, use alpha lock, so we can only paint on the pixels that are already there. And let's grab that color. Just darken that edge a little bit. Like that. I would like to do something similar with the trees, but to do that, I will have to merge the tree layers first. So I have opened up the group with all the trees, and now let's merge these just by pinching them together. And now I can make a layer with clipping mask on top of this layer. So we'll click the plus for that new layer, then select clipping mask, and we can set this layer to multiply. So just click that end and scroll up to multiply, so we can darken that area. And let's use this dark blue for that. Let's make the brush a bit bigger, 18%. And let's just glaze over that outside. Now this is a bit extreme. It's a bit too dark. But since this is a separate layer, you can just click on that M and lower that opacity to make that effect less extreme. Let's go to around 40%. Next, our scene needs a moon. Let's make that on a layer above our circle layer. Just click the plus there to make a new layer, and we'll pick this light yellow color. And for our brush, we'll use the monoline brush, which you can find under calligraphy. And let's make a circle. Just hold your pen in place, tap one finger on your screen for a perfect looking circle. And then just drag in the color to fill it. And now we want to remove a part of this moon, and we can do that with a layer mask. Just click that layer with the moon, go to mask, and now while we have black selected, just draw a circle, hold your pen in place, tap one finger on the screen, and then go to edit shape to move your circle around until you have something like this. And then you can just drag in that black and it'll be masked by your layer mask. For our moon, I also want to add some glow surrounding it. And to do that, we will duplicate this moon layer by swiping to the left, then click duplicate. And we will use this moon that's below the other moon, we will use that for our glow. But first, before we do that, we have to merge down our layer mask. So click that layer mask, then click merge down, and now we just have that moon shape. And this moon shape, we will blur a bit. Go to that magic wand, then to Gaussian blur to add a little glow. You can go to around 11, 12%, or well, whatever you like. I'll go to about 12%. And there we have a nice glowy moon. Then let's add some stars. We'll do that on, well, we can do that on a layer below the moon. Just click the plus there. And we can use the soft brush and make it really small. Go all the way down. And you can just play around with the opacity. Let's say 78 or 80. And let's pick this light blue color. And now by hand, we'll just draw in some little stars. I want to go a little bit bigger with our brush. This is a bit too much. And now you can see that it is at 1%, but even in the 1% range, we have some variations. I'll just go a little bit bigger, but it's still 1%. And no, I don't know why 1% can be lots of different things. So 1% can be really small, and it can be small but not really small. So just try to play around with that. So you can go for 1% big and then to 1% smaller. Just make a variation of stars. And now I'd like to add some clouds. And I want to make it a bit playful. I want them to cover, well, go out of the edges of that circle. So we'll make that layer above all the others. And let's go to the calligraphy set again and use the monoline brush. And we'll just make some stylized clouds. You can make some playful shapes. Just let it stick out of that side of the circle. Dragging your color. Let's also make one here. That also goes outside of that edge. And a little cloud here. And we'll fill that as well. And I would like to lower the opacity of these clouds. So click the layer and then the N. And I'll turn it down to, let's say 60% or 61. We're almost there. One thing we need is a nice reflection in the water, because yes, this is water right here. First thing I want to do is add some playful touches to that water as well. So we'll go back to that circle and we are going to add a little bit to that shape. So we'll go back to that watercolor and then we'll add some shapes, making that circle a little bit bigger and also a bit more playful. Let's say something like that. And you can just tweak it a little bit, adding parts. Let's just fill it by dragging in the color. You can work on the edges a little bit. Before we continue and add that reflection, I just really want to tell you about my first Skillshare class that I launched. Maybe you have already checked it. If you haven't, you should really check it out. I'll leave a link in the description for you. Okay, let's add a reflection. We will start with the mountains. But, before we do that, I want to add a little light to those mountains. Let's do that. Let's just add alpha lock to that mountain layer, so we will only be able to paint on those mountains. Let's go to airbrushing and use the soft brush, and then pick that moon color. So we can just add a little bit of a glow to those mountains. That will make them look a bit more interesting. Let's go to 10% brush size and let's lower the opacity. Let's go to like 30%. And then just glaze over gently to add a really slight glow. Yeah, I like that. That's like that moon shining on those mountains. That's nice. And now we can make that reflection. We'll have to duplicate that mountain layer for that. And then we will have to flip it. So we can do that by going to the Move tool and then click Flip Vertical. Now while you have magnetics turned on, you can drag it down just a little bit. I want to go for this. And of course we need to remove a little part. We can do that by going to the selection tool, use freehand or rectangle. Well, let's use rectangle. Let's make a rectangle here. And to remove this part of our layer, you can swipe with 3 fingers. But in case that doesn't work for you, you can also click that layer and go to clear. And then it has removed that part that you just don't want. Now let's do the same thing for the trees. Now to do that, we will need to merge these layers together and then duplicate them. So we squeeze them together, then duplicate it. And then we will have to move this layer below that ground layer. So drag it here, and now it automatically gets clipped. And then we can go to the Move tool again and go for Flip Vertical. And just drag it down a little bit. And again, let's go to the Selection tool. Select that area and clear it. You can also do that with 3 fingers. A 3-finger swipe to remove those bottom parts of the trees that were sticking out. Before we continue, I do want to lower the opacity of these layers a little bit. First those mountains, click that N and move the slider to the left a bit. Let's go for 50%. Now let's do the same for the trees. Lower that opacity as well. Let's go for 60. Now it's time to do the same thing for the tent and the campfire. To do that, let's group all these layers that belong to the tent and the campfire. Let's group these and then let's duplicate this group. And to be able to put it underneath that ground, we need to merge these layers. So just squeeze them all together and then we can move this one underneath that ground layer as well. You do really need to merge these layers before you move that. And then we can flip this one vertical again, drag it down to about here. And for this layer, I would like to use the blur tool. Let's go to the magic wand and then use a motion blur. Let's move it to the side just a little bit, like that. That looks nice. And then let's also lower the opacity for this layer a little bit. Let's go to 75%. But what you do see is that you can see these trees shining through that tent. And of course that doesn't make sense. So where the tent is, we will need to remove those trees. To do that in an easy way, let's select this layer, go to Select, and now this tent and also the campfire, these are selected. And we can go to the tree layer, use we can use the eraser or we can just wipe to remove that part of the trees. And we can do the same thing for those mountains. Click the layer with the tent, go to select, then go to that flipped version of the mountains, wipe that, and that's perfect. Oh, and before we forget, we also need to flip those stars, of course. Let's duplicate the stars layer and flip one of those. So use the move tool, go for flip vertical, and let's place them just about here and lower the opacity quite a bit. Let's go for 15. What I'd like to do as a final touch is add some ripples to the water. Let's see, we can do that. Well, we have to go above our reflection, of course. So we will select this flipped version of the tent and make a new layer there. And let's go to the monoline brush again. And for our color, we will use this light blue. First thing I'll do is create some ovals. And I'll make them pretty big. I'll hold the pen in place to make a quick shape. And I'll make one inside. And if you go to edit shape, you can edit it a little bit. And let's make another one inside. And now we can go to that move tool, click uniform, and then we can make this ripple a bit smaller and move it around. And to create more ripples, we can swipe down with 3 fingers and use copy and paste. Let's make one more. You can make some a bit bigger and some a bit smaller, like that. Now we have 3 nice ripples. Let's merge these ripples. And now I want to add a layer mask here. So click the layer, then select mask, and use black to mask some parts of that ripple. To make it look just a bit more ripply. You have created your own campfire scene and you have learned so much along the way. I hope you had fun. If you did, then you might want to check out my other video tutorials as well. Perhaps you'll like these 2 videos right here. I will see you next time.